Hello peoples of the internet, and welcome to another Stairway mountain time trial. Here I have the Bucknell Moonhawk Lowrider, which I'm sliding all over the place here. It's a Moonhawk, which is a lowrider, made by a man called Pedro, presumably in his garage. I put the handling precisely in the middle of the table, as was the time it eventually achieved. It's neither wonderful like the Covet, or terrible like the 200BX. It's somewhere in the middle. The tail will get sliding outwards if you're not careful, as I do because my driving's a bit sloppy on this lap. Please forgive me for that. And yeah, I've driven much worse vehicles, so it was quite nice overall in the grand scheme of things, and it didn't take me too long to get to the end. When I got to the end, the damage was reasonably minimal, mainly caused by the jump at the end, because this copes with the bumps and things really nicely. It's not an easy car to kill, put simply, and that's good. On to the next vehicle. Next up, we have the Honda Prelude Wide Wantobes, which I can only assume is a modified Prelude. There's no description, so yeah. It's got an open differential though, that's something I could feel. And it means the tyres are squealing for pretty much the whole lap. It's annoying, and as you can probably tell from my tone, I found this car a bit annoying. It's not a very good car to drive overall. If you brake, the car will turn under the brakes a lot of the time. I'm guessing there's just too much power on the rear brakes. If you accelerate, it does actually pull itself around the corner quite nicely, but you often end up accelerating to try and steady the vehicle. And if you try and accelerate at a really high speed, you'll just lose all cornering for some reason. This happened a few times, and I managed to drive it right into a sign at the side of the road because I couldn't adjust the car to go away from it. And that was a bit annoying, really. But the difficulty to drive and the lack of anti-lock brakes, among other things, meant it was not a very nice vehicle to drive. Although, with all credit to the modder who made this, it's probably how an old Honda from the 70s or 80s would drive. I mean, not very well. As much as I'd like to associate this with the likes of the NSX Type R and the Honda Integra for cornering performance, I can't. Who can forget the X2000 as well? I can't associate with those, it just doesn't handle like those legendary Hondas. But, you know, I did manage to get to the end, and my computer didn't record it. And then I managed to get it to the end again, and my computer didn't record it. So, here we'll just show you the Honda sitting on some grass. The damage is similar, other than it's got one less wheel. I mean, it did a lot of damage on the end jump, because as much as this copes with bumps and things reasonably well, you don't want to go across them because it can really mess up the handling and throw you off a cliff or something. It's just a dangerous old car, and the tyres feel far too skinny. On to the next vehicle. Next up we have the Chateau Tanpesimo. Hopefully I said that correctly. Anyway, it's a low Pasima with slightly strange wheels and, oddly, rear wheel drive. Now, the handling on this is a matter where I can't be too sure to start really. It's like the 200BX, only nicer to drive. It will get the tail out, but if you're careful with the acceleration and careful with the cornering, it will do quite nicely, which is good. and I don't really know what else I can say. It's a bit messed up by the bumps at times, and it's at a reasonable time that was very similar to the lowrider actually. And yeah, it didn't take me too many attempts to get a good one with this. When I got it to the end, the bumps messed it up a lot. Well, the bump at the end messed up a lot. However, it looked like I'd oddly enough messed the axle up earlier on, as in the left wheel was further backwards than the right wheel on the front axle. And that was a bit strange, but it's happened with front wheel drive cars before, and they've kept driving. The odd thing being this is rear wheel drive and it still happened. But that's all I've really got to say. On to the next vehicle. Next up we have the standard 90s Pasima. It's a low Pasima with a lot of camber on the wheels, because camber's all in fashion and everything at the moment. Although the developers did state that this car was unusable and useless, you'll see it cracked the windscreen, maybe that's what they mean, but it doesn't drive too bad, and the camber on the wheels makes it really difficult to tip over. A low ride height probably helps with that as well. The point remains, this is not an easy car to tip over. You have to be really flying into a corner and applying full lock to get it to tip. It's front wheel drive and not a bad vehicle to drive, although you can feel at times the suspension's too low. For example, we see the base model 90s Pasima was a nice vehicle to drive. It had a decent suspension setup, which was a good part of that, but this has just lowered it. It's kind of messed the suspension setup up a bit. It may also be the V6 being a bit too much weight over the front, but overall, not a bad car. I got to the end after a few tries and set a pretty good time. I believe it may still have been slower than the base model Pasima though, but all in all, a car I would recommend, other than it getting messed up over the end, which I believe may just be a characteristic of the very low cars. On to the next vehicle. Next up we have the 200BX Carbon Fibre Madness, because I just love the 200BXs and I can't stay away from them when speaking ironically. I mean, 200BXs, they just oversteer when you try and put much power down, but this, by the standards of 200BXs, wasn't actually that bad. Either I'm getting used to the way 200BXs handle, or it just had that bit more grip on the rear, which was always handy, which gave me that bit more confidence and let me drive it that bit quicker. It did seem to grip better though, judging by the lap time, because although it might have been nothing rivaling the 80s Pasima GTZ Custom or the Grand Marshal Custom, both of which set really quick times, it was quicker than both the other 200BXs, which is good. As I said though, goodbye 200BX standards, this will still slide out the way up on the crest. If you try and floor it, the rear will overtake the front, but with some good careful driving, I was able to get a decent lap. When I got it to the end, it was in pretty neat condition, because that's how you have to drive a 200BXs. If the 200BX is wrecked, it won't even get to the end. unlike, say, the Covet, where you can completely mess up the rear end and it'll still be somewhat drivable because it's front engine, front wheel drive. This, you mess it up, you lose all handling. Anyway, despite the 200BX slidey problems, it was a decent vehicle, and that's a good thing to say. On to the next vehicle. Next up we have an ETK 800, although this is no ordinary ETK 800, and for once I'm not just saying it for publicity purposes. It is the Rocket 900, appropriately named because it's got a 5.2 litre Lamborghini V10 making 900 horsepower. Took my brain a while there. It's got four-wheel drive and a wide body kit, and it does struggle to put the power down, but through being very careful it copes with it just fine, although the wide body nature of it does get annoying at times. Quite a lot of the time actually. It has a tendency to lose wheels when you hit things, because you hit something sideways, there's no bodywork to take the impact. The impact just goes straight to the wheels, and that's why I had to be really careful with it. Still, despite that, that didn't stop it from becoming my quickest vehicle. It is reasonably controllable after all. It's just with great power comes great responsibility, and great responsibility is something that I just don't have. So yes, you can guess how most of my ones went. Anyway, I got it to the end, and naturally there wasn't much damage because, as I said, any damage just takes your wheels off. And yeah, it was the quickest car I've had, which was good. I mean, I believe I've said all I need to now. Got a bit smashed up over the jump because it had the impact to deal with. But yeah, that's all I've got now. On to the next vehicle. Now, the final vehicle I will be driving today is the Gavel Roma Custom. I believe this is a car from the Variators Pack mod, and it's lovely, to be honest. It has a Stage 2 supercharged V8. I'd assume it's the same one as the Grand Marshal, in which case it makes 475 horsepower. That's a lot of power for something this high off the ground, but it copes with it well. And it doesn't feel like it's going to tip over as much as you might expect it to. If you really throw it into a corner, it will tip over, but even then you can stop it just by counter steering. It is nice over bumps as well. To a certain extent I wanted to just throw this at bumps because it was fun to see just how it went over the bumps as if they weren't there. It's the most incredible vehicle over the bumps. It does have problems, namely that it lifts a wheel round corners almost constantly, meaning it's probably not putting as much power down as it could. But apart from that, it's a lovely vehicle. It also set the 4th fastest time on my leaderboard, I believe in large part due to the handling characteristics being so nice. Now, coming up to the end, I did knock it on a wall and damage the steering, but it was fine. At the end, not much went wrong with it because it's got the ride height. It could actually land the jump just fine. Could probably drive more, but I didn't try. But the engine was probably in suitable condition to drive. Yeah, a car I would definitely recommend. Only just slower than the Covet, another good car to drive. I'd say this is nicer still though, to drive than that. Goodbye.